But I thought what I would do here with the second part of tonight's podcast is just share with you what Jessica Bruder wrote. Now, remember, she's the author of Nomadland, Surviving America in the 21st Century, which was the basis for the film that won, I know it won Best Picture and Best Actress in a Leading Role. And I think a couple more, maybe cinematography. But if you haven't seen the film, you need to see it. Nomadland. And I just want to share with you what she wrote in much the same way that I share things with you sometimes that other people have written word for word, because I think what they have written is nothing that I can improve upon or elaborate upon. And if I try to put it in my own words, it would just detract from what the person wrote. So I'm going to share it with you. She writes, spending the first night in my 1995 GMC camper van, I lay awake for hours in my sleeping bag, watching the window shades glow, white, then red, over and over, as cars sped past in the dark. Is that one slowing down? I wondered. Can they see I'm in here? Will they call the cops? Van dwellers had told me about the knock, usually 3 sharp raps at the door, often by the police. The risk of getting jolted awake and kicked off my patch of asphalt kept me uneasy and made it hard to sleep. I was living in a van as a journalist, as research for my book, Nomadland. Over the course of 3 years, I followed Americans who had been squeezed out of traditional housing and moved into vans, late model RVs, even a few sedans. I drove more than 15,000 miles from coast to coast, from Mexico to the Canadian border. And night after night, I'd bedded down in a new place, whether a truck stop or the Sonoran Desert. Sometimes I stayed on city streets or in suburban parking lots, which rattled me in ways I'd never expected. For people whose only home is a vehicle, the knock is a visceral, even existential threat. How do you avoid it? You hide in plain sight, make yourself invisible, internalize the idea that you're unwelcome. Stay hypervigilant to avoid trouble. Apart from telling you to clear out, the police can harass you with fines and tickets or get your home on wheels towed away to an impound lot. I think about the knock a lot these days. More people are moving into vehicles as shelters of last resort, and their ranks are likely to swell when COVID-19 eviction bans expire. Laws punishing the unhoused population have been appearing around the country in a wave of so-called NIMBYism, not in my backyard-ism. We are emerging from what may be the most introspective year in American history. The meditative film, based on my book, which was up for 6 Oscars this weekend, fits the mood well. The pandemic has prompted much talk of interconnectedness and empathy, what we owe one another as a society. Nomadland reminds us that our bonds should extend to those who live in homes on wheels. No one should have to live in constant fear of the knock. In the film, Fern, played by Frances McDormand, is startled by a knock that interrupts a quiet meal. She looks up with a start and swears. A face hovers at the window and a fist pounds once, twice, 3 times on the door. Then comes a gruff voice, "No overnight parking. You can't sleep here." Watching the characters panic at the sudden sound of a fist hitting her van gave me anxious flashbacks. Then it made me sad. And then I felt angry because that scene was just too accurate, and I wished it didn't reflect the reality of how people treat one another. Some of the nomads from my book play versions of themselves in the film. They know this phenomenon too well. Swanky, who's 76 years old, told me she had nightmares about it while sleeping in her 2006 Chevy Express van. She said, quote, "I have this strange, surreal dream of someone knocking. Usually happens if I'm not 100% comfortable with where I am parking," end quote. Bob Wells, who's 65, has a popular video entitled "Avoiding the Knock" and has been lecturing on the topic for ages. I first heard him talk about it 7 years ago in the Sonoran Desert at a gathering called the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. He shared tactics for so-called stealth parking, such as creating police-friendly alibis and making your van look like a contractor's work vehicle. At first listen, I thought about how clever and resourceful these strategies were, but after hearing them a few times, I reached a second conclusion, which is, in a better world, people wouldn't have to go to such lengths just to stay out of sight. The nonprofit National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty keeps tabs on over 180 urban and rural cities across America, more than half of which have enacted laws that make it hard or nearly impossible to live in vehicles. Over the past decade, Tristia Bauman, an attorney at the center, has seen the regulations multiply. Some places forbid overnight parking. Others outlaw inhabiting a vehicle outright. Penalties can pile up fast. Unpaid, they lead to the cruelest punishment of all, towing. Failing to pay an impound fee means losing not just a car, but a home. What would a surge of pandemic-related evictions mean for this community? Ms. Bauman said, quote, "We are very concerned, bordering on terrified, about what the future might hold," end quote. There are a few bright spots. Some towns have created areas where vehicle dwellers can sleep undisturbed, modeled after the safe parking program that began in 2004 in Santa Barbara, California. But those places are few and far between. More often, the knock is the law of the land. In the run-up to the Oscars, some have asked what viewers might take away from the film. Letting vehicle dwellers exist in peace would be a fine start. Individuals have the power to help. When you see someone living in a car or a van or an RV, don't call the police. If you've seen the movie, remember how the knock made Fern cringe, her voice tightening with anxiety and exhaustion as she shouted, "I'm leaving, okay, I'm leaving." Then envision a kinder scene in which people can eat or sleep in peace, even if their homes are on wheels. Now, that's a short piece written by Jessica Bruder that appeared over the weekend in the New York Times, she being the author of Nomadland, Surviving America in the 21st Century. And I think you can tell very quickly why I see an intersection of that book and movie with the Black Lives Matter movement. The two situations are not similar in the extreme form of punishment that occurs. Black folk are being murdered. Van and car dwellers who are homeless are not. And therein lies the huge difference. But the similarity for me is the fact that both groups, if I can refer to them as groups, which is kind of ridiculous, but both groups know that they're on the margins of what is happening in this country. Now, this is not to suggest by any means that Black folk are, as a group, as a division of the population, exists on any kind of margin. Some of the most successful people in America are African American. I don't mean to suggest that, but where it concerns police presence into the lives of Black folk, you can be a professor at Princeton. You can be somebody who sells loose cigarettes on the street. You can be a business person on her way to work. You can be a tourist traveling through a certain area that is known for police harassment of black people. You can be any one of those folks and still know full well, if you are a person of color, that the risk is always there. The risk that that white cop is going to pull you over or stop you on the street or question you when you're making a purchase in a mall. And how you answer is not necessarily the determinant as to whether or not you're about to be shot. What the determinant is what's going on in that white cop's head. Because no matter what you do, if you're African American, in that moment, you can show your hands, doesn't mean shit. You can get out of the car as ordered, doesn't mean shit. You can reach for your wallet to show ID, and that may get a goddamn bullet in the back of your head. So what do you do? What do you do? So my finding comparisons between homelessness and the Black Lives Matter movement is strictly surfacey, but it's still there. At least for me it was. And I don't know how to even suggest resolution to either of those problems without a complete restructuring, refiguring of American society, 21st century. For real. I mean, where it concerns homelessness, you know what I've tried to do recently? I'm not always successful because I have to admit, and I am embarrassed to admit this, but it's difficult for me to approach someone who is obviously homeless. It's difficult for me to approach them and just say good morning or good afternoon or hey, what's up or what's happening or yo, here, and hand them $5. It's difficult for me to do that out of fear. And I'm embarrassed as hell to admit that. But it's something that I am determined to overcome. Not that my cheesy ass little $5 is going to make any difference to this person. But then on the other hand, just in that moment, yes, it will, because along with the $5, I'm saying hi to them. And I have come to learn that the one thing that the homeless would tell you they miss the most, especially if they're on their own, not living in an encampment somewhere, but the one thing they miss the most is the sound of a human voice. Because most people like me are scared to approach a homeless person. Where it concerns my black brothers and sisters, what I am trying to do now is when I cross paths with a black man or a black woman. Now understand, I've got black friends, but I don't let my interactions with black folk extend beyond those friendships. And I'm trying to overcome that. So now, when I cross paths with a black man or black woman, I'm in the grocery store, I'm at the mall, I'm wherever I'm at, I'm on the street, I'm in a drugstore. And if I come close to them, I got my mask on, they got their mask on, all this other bullshit, but I will say, hey, hello. Or in a certain circumstance, if both of us approach the door to leave an establishment, I will goddamn go out of my way to hold the door open for that black woman. I don't give a damn if she's 40 years younger than me. I will do it. And you know the reaction I always get? Surprise. What? What? This old white man has opened the door for me? What? Now, I'm reading into that. I don't hear anybody say that, but you know, I can read expressions. I can read body language. So those are the two things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying desperately to overcome some bullshit that somehow I've accumulated. On the one hand, the bullshit about racism, the seeds were planted for that long before I could even say my goddamn name. But the bullshit about homelessness, I'm not exactly sure where that came from. I think where it came from is growing up in a capitalist society that said to me, you're not worth shit, boy, until you own this, until you own that, until you can buy this over here, until you can have that over there. You're not anything until you have a diploma on the wall, until you have material things, until you were making X amount of dollars a year. Until that time, you're just invisible. Maybe that's where I decided that homeless people had to be invisible to me. You know, it's really hell. It has been for me anyway, trying to unlearn shit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just trying to unlearn things that eventually in your lifetime, if you're lucky to have had people point stuff out to you like I've been, to unlearn things that you didn't realize you were learning. And then to all of a sudden see the truth, and somebody points out, the truth that you think you see, Malloy, is not the truth. This is the truth. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.